Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about sexual abuse and eating disorders. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, two topics, one session. This is going to be such a good conversation. I already know it. Thank you so much, Patty, for coming on to my show. She will be here to help us think about this in another light so that we can keep on thinking. So, Patty, let's go ahead and dive right in. When you think of sexual abuse and eating disorders, what does that make you think about?
First of all, thank you for having me, Mitzi. I'm so excited to be here with you and to talk about two things that I don't think we talk about enough, childhood sexual abuse and eating disorders. And there's a
Yeah.
huge correlation between the two of them, but you find almost nothing about it online. And you started by asking me a really interesting question. What do I think about when I think about it? And I would say to you, based on my own personal experience, I never thought about the two together. And I struggled with my weight for many years. I was sexually abused as a child. Starting in my teens, I started gaining and losing 50 to 75 pounds every 2 years. I did it for 20 years, didn't know why, was a great dieter, always lost the weight, but couldn't maintain it. And it was only when I was 38 that I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life unless I figure out why. Like, because it's not too
Yeah.
hard to lose weight, right? Like, it's calories in, calories out. It's not like it's rocket science, but I couldn't maintain it. And it was only when I started working with a therapist who dealt with eating disorders, who also had a background in trauma, that we kind of went through my history, which, if anybody has never been to therapy before, that's kind of what you do. They get to know you. They want to know your life experiences, what makes you you. And
Hmm.
we landed on my childhood sexual abuse. And she was like, your weight is a symptom of that. And I tell you, Mitzi, I could have been locked in a room by myself for 100 years. I never would have come to that conclusion. I never would
Yeah.
have made the connection. I never would have figured it out.
Absolutely. And I think that is something that we don't correlate together. And that's the reason why when you brought this topic up, I was just like, why would I say no? I would be doing myself and the world a disservice for us to not talk about and think about this topic. Because right there, when you said that your therapist was able to correlate the two together to give you the reason why. And it just makes sense because so many people don't realize what why they're eating much or why they're not eating enough, or you know what I mean? Every scenario is going to be different, obviously, because we live a very subjective life, but we
Yeah.
all are some way, shape, or form affected by trauma. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And that's
Yes.
something that's going to be an equal ground for every human being is that you're going to have some type of trauma, and how you handle that trauma and how you perceive that trauma will determine steps and repercussions and things later on in your life that will linger. And I'm curious, how did you start healing this relationship with food then?
First, I want to just touch on another thing he said, because he's just said such another great thing, and that is truly we all have trauma, and there's big trauma, little trauma, right? I mean, that's the human condition. Like, living life is painful, but I would say no matter what your trauma, whether we choose to self-medicate, right? And
Yeah.
because it's painful, so it could be food, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be gambling, it could be sex. I mean, take your pick, right? And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what kind of abuse you suffer, physical, emotional, mental, sexual, whatever, everything leaves its mark on you. And so as we try to like distance ourselves from the pain and we self-medicate, we pick these different things to help us dull that. And I would say straight away to anybody who found themselves in the same cycle as me, where you're in the same battle repeatedly and you're not making traction, chances are you are not addressing the root cause. Like, nobody's
Hmm.
perfectly happy and decides to become an alcoholic, or perfectly happy and becomes a drug addict, or loses all their money gambling, right? There's something else driving it that's much more painful than what you're doing to yourself. And you need to like be able to get down there and dig into it. And I will say, I was very tortured by my weight and the way I looked. I'm female. I think that's part of the world we live in too, right? Like, it's,
Yeah.
I could be thinner, I could be prettier, I could be whatever. I was
Yeah.
really very tortured by the way I looked. And honestly, once we started dealing with my childhood sexual abuse, my weight became the easiest thing to manage, which is not to say I didn't still struggle with the way I
Yeah.
looked and hated the way I looked, but it was just on a much smaller scale.
Yeah. No, no, it makes sense. It makes sense because the issue is still there, but it's not as grand as it was before. So it's tolerable because now you have other things to focus on, other things to fill your day, other things to just help you ease through those through those intrusive thoughts that come in, because we all have to realize like what are the thoughts that coming in when we're having that moment, you know what I mean? When we're having that moment of we're about to eat, are you gonna eat because you feel like it's good, it's healthy, you need the energy, or are you gonna eat because of a situation? Are you trying to fill it? Are you not going down to that root problem, like you said? Because when we focus on the root problem, we take accountability. You know what I mean? And we take and then it allows us to honor what is really going on. And I think when we take that power back within ourselves, it allows us to heal along at the same time. What do you think on that?
Well, I think, it is interesting. My shrink used to say to me all the time because I would come in and the way there's a couple of things that I want to say in response to what you said. One of them is that I think for me, because I was sexually abused as a child and I felt ruined, I think in a lot of ways I viewed my body as the scene of the crime. So I hated my body, right? I think I had that definitely as an undercurrent for me. So I was very fixated from that perspective. But so I would go into her office, and even after I had lost the weight and maintained it, I would still, if I gained 5 pounds and my weight would fluctuate like 10 pounds, I was tortured by it. And she used to say to me, she was like, it's just a distraction. You do this all the time. Like she was so bored by me talking about my weight and my binges because she's like, it's a distraction. And even though I made so much progress, it's like you still always go back to your go-tos, right? It's like kind of like the devil you know is better than the one you don't. It's a pain you're used to.
Yeah, exactly. It is a pain you're used to. That's funny that you say that. Your therapist was just already, okay, come on now, something new, please, something new. So when it comes to your sexual abuse, what is something that you have gained from this? You know what I mean? From now that you explored it with a therapist, how do you feel now where you are today?
I think that I am night and day compared to where I used to be in terms of I'm so much more open. And I used to be very, very controlling, which I also think is not unusual for anybody who's had any kind of
Yeah.
trauma, right? You want to control your situation, you want to control the
Mhm.
people you're around.
Yep.
And so I'm much more flexible than I used to be, which is great. I will say, though, I definitely feel like, you are informed by the things that happen to you. And there's flip sides to what I'm going to say. I am one side of the coin. I think that people who don't feel like they had boundaries around themselves either grow up being very protective of those boundaries and don't want anybody in, or it's just the opposite. They feel like they have no control, so everybody has access. So I think you have people who are either wildly promiscuous or very, live a monastic
Hmm.
existence. And I am definitely in that camp. I will never be promiscuous. It's just not who I am. And I think
Hmm.
that me meeting men, while it's certainly much easier, I'm still wary, right? Like I think that's just always going to be part of who I am. Like, what do you want? What do you want?
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think that's something real. You know what I mean? That people really need to realize, like, it just with time you just modify your thoughts with it. With time you just modify the way that you act. You know what I mean? The way that you perceive and you move through life, and it doesn't define you. It's not all that you are, but it's like it is what it is at this point. You know what I mean? And you're learning how to adapt with it as it comes because at the end of the day, no one's perfect. You know what I mean? No one's perfect. And we're all
Exactly.
trying to figure it out along the way. So I'm curious, what is one of your biggest pet peeves in life?
In life. Oh, I have so many. I have so many. Um, I don't like it when people take advantage of other people. And I think that I'm very good at protecting myself, although my one failing that I always perceived was my ability to protect myself with men. And back to kind of your other question, for many years I locked myself away because I didn't trust myself to set the boundaries I wanted. So I just locked myself away. And I have
Mm.
definitely gotten much better. I will go out and I am comfortable now saying that makes me uncomfortable. I don't want any part of this. I don't put other people, particularly strange men, and by strange men I mean men that I don't know. I don't put
Yeah.
strangers' needs before my own. And I think for a long time I did, where I didn't feel entitled to say no. So even though that was somebody who meant nothing to me, I didn't feel like I could say no. So I didn't go
Yeah.
out. And I don't do that anymore, which is great. But I think far too many people do that, where they put other people's needs before their own. And I don't have children, but I would say if you're a parent, obviously I think you should put your children's needs before your own. Not all the time, but there are certainly points where it's appropriate for you to do that, or any close relationships where other people's needs are going to trump your own. But for people who don't mean anything because they're not important to you at this point in your life, or you don't know them, your needs should come first.
Yeah.
So it bothers me that people prey on other people's vulnerabilities, and they do. People are, you know,
Some people are really the worst because they take someone's kindness and they see it as a weakness, or they see somebody and they're like, oh, they can be my victim, or oh, that they could be my stepping stool to where I need to be,
exactly.
and it breaks somebody's character. It makes them question the world in such a way that they can turn dark, and how dark will they go? We don't know until we find out for ourselves. You know what I mean? So I absolutely agree. I don't think it's fair because at the end of the day, we're all, like I said earlier, we're all just trying to figure it out. We're all just doing our best with the tools that we were given at birth. You know what I mean? With what we were given. So it's just like to take advantage of somebody is just it's frustrating. It's very frustrating because it's like I know what you mean by the sense of like I try to protect myself and how you would seclude yourself because that's how you knew. I feel the same way. I'm still learning my voice, but when I step into that voice and I step into my boundaries and I voice up, I feel more empowered and I feel like I'm respecting my inner child. You know what I mean? I'm giving back my inner child that
Yes.
security that you can trust me and we can do this together because I don't think people realize like your inner child is still wondering what's happening while you're living your life now as an adult. You know what I mean? I mean, is that how you kind of see it?
Well, it's funny that you talk about an inner child because I don't know how old you are, but I'm assuming I'm much, much older than you. And there was a point where inner child was kind of like the parlance and, talk therapy and whatever. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I thought it was nonsense. Like, and it would be like, my inner child is wounded. And it's like, stop. And it was really only when I was in therapy that we did what was called parts work and really the thinking behind it. And I think it's unfortunate that this whole inner child for people of my generation kind of got misconstrued. But basically, what it is that when you're traumatized, that part of you is cut off and arrested. It stops where it is. So if you're 3, if you're 5, if you're 10, if you're 15, whatever, that part of you gets cut off and stops at that point in time. And my therapist used to say to me all the time, like, because a lot of the work that we did really focused on these different parts of me, which were different ages when things happened to me. And she was like, you do everything in your power to push it aside, tamp it down, ignore it. And she's like, that's what everybody did to you. And she's like, and
Yeah.
until you learn to hear that part of yourself, to actually work through it, it will always drive you because it's not fully formed and developed. So it's still, like trying
Yeah.
to be heard. And only once it's heard, once it's resolved, can it be put to rest.
Mm, that's beautiful. I like the way that you put that. That is nicely said because you're right. A lot of people do have that misunderstanding, especially in
Yeah.
the older generations, like you said. But I think it is beautiful how now the younger generation is trying to change it to allow everybody to know what it really is. And it's like you said, we have to heal it. We have to put it to rest. We have to acknowledge it and give ourselves that moment to acknowledge it because we feel like we're fighting a battle against the world and against and within ourselves, but we don't take the time to acknowledge what's actually going in ourselves that's causing a war that we feel like is happening. You know what I mean? So it's
I,
really interesting that people don't take that into consideration until they hear somebody else talk about it. And then they're like, huh, now that gives me something to think about. That's why we have these conversations.
exactly, because we want to think about. But I think too, for me, and again, I don't think I'm unique in any way, but I never thought about what happened to me, right? I was very young when it happened. My mother divorced my stepfather when I was 11, like, and he was out of my life, and we moved across the country, and I started over, and I never thought about it. I always knew what happened, but I never thought about it. I never dealt with it. But just because you don't deal with it doesn't mean it goes away. It's still driving you. It is always bubbling just below the surface, and it motivates people in ways they don't understand. So your behaviors, your actions, it's driven by these things you don't understand. And I would say one of my biggest challenges was I didn't like to feel anything. And so when I was in therapy, and it's like you start mining all of these feelings, and I found it terrifying to feel emotions, but you have to be able to feel them, and then you have to be able to name them. Like you need to understand what you feel so that you can work through
Absolutely.
it. And that's a lot of work, and it's scary. And
It is.
particularly for people who are controlling, it's a loss of control, right? I was afraid I would drown in my grief and sorrow. I thought I would
Yeah.
be overtaken by my sadness.
Oh, absolutely. Is that vulnerability aspect because I've
It's
spoken with
horrible.
somebody
It's worse.
who who's like, oh, what? No, what? They like walk away with a 10-foot pole. No way, no how. But you're absolutely right. That is something that we all really need to consider, you know what I mean? And really marinate this thought about just sitting with your emotions and just feeling it because I realize that emotions are a hidden blessing. You know what I mean? Because not everybody actually gets to feel them, like you said,
No.
because so many people want to feel numb. And some people, unfortunately, are actually born with the incapability to feel certain emotions. Very rare, but still happens. You know what I mean? So, with that being said, you have to appreciate these emotions that come through you because sometimes they're warning you, sometimes they're guiding you, sometimes they're allowing you to be free, sometimes they're letting you know it's okay. But it's like if you don't recognize these emotions when it's happening, then you're going to feel uncontrolled, or you're going to feel numb, or you're going to feel like a robot. Like you feel safer by by not having emotions and not reacting as the rest of the world. But in reality, it's like you're not allowing yourself to really experience the world. So that's it's like a double-edged sword, you know what I mean? But it's like once you take that time to actually appreciate your emotions, you can realize like, oh wow, I'm grateful that I get to know what anger feels. I'm grateful to know what happiness is and what love is. It's like all of these emotions are a beautiful blessing to just experience, you know? So, oh my goodness, time is truly catching up to us. What can be some lasting words that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
I would say a few things. One of them is if you are sexually abused as a child, and it's a horrifying statistic, 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys under age 18. That's like horrifying. If and any kind of abuse, physical, mental, no matter what happens to you, if you're a child, it's not your fault ever. It's never your fault. And that was something that was very hard for me to believe because I think, again, not unique. When children grow up in fractured environments and nobody takes responsibility, they assume everything is their fault. It's not your fault. And it might take you years to believe that it's not your fault, but it's not your fault. So that's number one. Number two is one of the beautiful things about the time we live in now is that there are so many resources available to help. So even if you don't have a neighbor, a friend, a teacher, hopefully you do have someone in your life that you feel like you can trust, you can tell. That would be great. But if not, there's so many organizations online for whatever it is. If it's sexual abuse, RAINN.org is a great one. It's rape, incest, like they're a great one. If it's an eating disorder, the National Alliance of Eating Disorders, it's NEDA.org, and EDA is another great one. But really, whatever your issue may be, there is help out there and you can get help for free. So that's another one. And I would say never lose hope. Even if it seems like you are in a horrible situation now, and I don't doubt that lots of people are really just stuck and suffering, it doesn't mean it's going to be like that tomorrow. You always have to have hope and do what you can. And that's another thing. I was in therapy for a very long time, and I would say it was a mercy. I didn't know how long I was going to be in therapy, but every day I made progress. And that's what you need to focus on. As long as you're moving forward, no matter how slowly, you're moving forward. And that's something positive to latch on to. So don't lose hope,
Yes.
don't lose despair.
Oh, I love that last one. Absolutely. We have to remember that it's the little milestones. And if you set those little milestones, praise them. Nobody else has to know. Nobody else has to know that
Exactly.
your goal on that list was just to just put the clothes in the basket. No, no one has to know. If you did it, then you know what? Congratulate yourself. Sit down for 5 minutes, whatever it is, but praise what those little steps are because nobody knows how much you have to talk yourself just to do something so simple from somebody else's perspective. You know what I mean? Everybody moves
Absolutely.
differently. So I
Nobody else.
love that. I
Nobody
love
else
that.
is walking in your shoes. And I would say the other thing too, if you do find yourself battling it, and food is a hard one because it's so readily available and it's
Yeah.
also very acceptable in a lot of ways, right? Like nobody's going to really think to, although we are terrible with the way we fat shame people. But other than that, so I would say no matter what your issues are, because we did kind of start out talking about eating disorders, perfection is an impossibility, right? Give yourself a measure of grace when things don't go the way that you hoped, when things don't go the way that you planned. You're not a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's just that we all, it's always two steps forward, one step back. And again, give yourself a measure of grace. Every moment is a new opportunity to start again. Let go of the
Yes.
past. Just try and be present and move forward.
Exactly. Give yourself that compassion. You're only
Exactly.
doing the best you can. So it's like you wouldn't be upset or mad at somebody if they did something, you know what I mean, that they felt like they couldn't accomplish. No, you would still praise them. So that means you need to be able to praise yourself and give yourself that grace, like you said. That is truly some wise words for us to keep on thinking because this is a matter that lands. It's like it could be a big umbrella with little topics in between. You know, you could really go so many places with this topic. And I'm glad that we went the way that we did because I feel like we tackled still a lot of areas. But if, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys want to know more about Patty and what she has to offer the world, I have her lovely photo with her website. You can click right there, right under, and then you can find all the goodness that she has to offer the world so that you can keep on thinking. So, with that being said, bye.